Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some oxy fuel setup as far as the how to go about setting up your workstation, as well as shutdown processes and some minor safety when it comes to oxy fuel. In this case, with our oxyacetylene manifold, we're talking strictly oxygen and acetylene. So when it comes to setup here, a few things that you need to note too when it comes to oxygen and acetylene. Let's start with color coding. Our red color indicates our fuel, our acetylene with our manifold. Oxygen indicates is indicated by a green color. A few other things that you need to note when it comes to identification between your fuels and your oxygen. Look at your fittings. If you were to look at, for example, here on our torch handle, one fitting that has a notch, another fitting that is just a clean fitting, for lack of a better word. The notch fitting indicates a fuel. The clean fitting indicates oxygen. Another way that they are helping you out in identifying what is fuel, what is oxygen, with the notch fitting, that is a reverse threaded fitting. They'll do the same thing with fittings such as the regulator attachment to our valve is notched, indicating also fuel, and that is a reverse threading. When it comes to our regulators, if you look at our fuel or acetylene, notice that it just goes 5, 10, 15, and then by beyond our 15, it becomes a shade of red. Well, in this case, this indicates that it is an unsafe level beyond 15 psi, pounds per square inch. Above 15 psi, acetylene becomes unstable and becomes unsafe for use. We never exceed the pressure of 15 psi when it comes to our acetylene. Oxygen, if you look at the regulator, it's shown in higher numbers, 10, 20, 30. This is a high pressure gas as compared to our acetylene, which is low pressure. Since it is a low pressure gas, when it comes to opening up our valve, we can just open it up, turn of a wrist. By having this open turn of wrist, not only, since it's a low pressure gas, if ever there were to be any kind of danger, we can quickly turn off the fuel, cut it completely, and be out of harm's way. So whenever we start up our gases, we start with acetylene. Again, opening turn of a wrist. Oxygen is next. It is a high pressure gas, and I open it up all the way. Next would be our regulator tension screws. And I am setting up my regulator. And I'm just going to set it up as if I'm going to be doing oxy fuel welding. Set it up to 5 psi. Oxygen. Set it up to 10. Again, just for demonstration purposes, I set my acetylene up for 5, my oxygen up to 10 psi. From there, I can go ahead, get my torch handle set up in order to do welding. I have here my tip. The tip is fastened by hand. Hand tightening is all that you need. No wrenches, no vice grips, nothing else, no other tools are involved when it comes to tightening this. You never want to over tighten the tips, because if you were to look closely at the tips, you notice that it has 2 different seals, O-rings, attached to the tips. By over tightening, you are crushing those O-rings. From there, you can either break the O-rings and this allows gas to spill from your tip and torch handles. So to maintain the life of the O-rings, a simple hand tightening, a nice snug fit is all that you'll need. So I've gone about my welding. At this point, we begin our shutdown process. So I'll put away my torch, my tip, I could then turn off my gases. I'll start acetylene, turn of the wrist, close my oxygen, and from there, I'll bleed my lines. It's very important to bleed your lines prior to backing off your regulators, because having your regulators pressurized is allowing that gas to escape from the lines in your torch handle. By backing off that line, backing off your regulators before bleeding lines, what you're doing is you're relieving that pressure so the gas has nowhere to go, so it sits. So really, you wouldn't be bleeding the lines at all. So leave the pressure as it is. From there, you want to bleed the lines, draining out the gases that are trapped within the lines. You'll notice that the needle is dropped. I'm down to 0. The line is bled for acetylene. I'll then start my oxygen bleeding. My needle is dropped. I'm down to 0 psi. From there, make sure that your valves on your torch handle are closed, and you can then back off the regulator. Now, when I say backing off the regulator, that means that you are not backing out the regulators all the way, the tension screws all the way from the regulators. You do not want to undo the tension screws all the way out of the regulators, okay? To prevent any kind of damage to your regulators and to relieve yourself of the trouble of having to put back the tension screws. A simple just few turns relieving the tension from the tension screws is all that you're going to need. From there, the lines are bled, the tension screws are relieved, the valves are closed. You have successfully shut down your oxyacetylene setup. A few other pointers when it comes to oxy-fuel use and safety. Shade 5s goggles or glasses are a must-have when it comes to welding or cutting. It helps not only be able to see where you're cutting and see your puddle as you're welding with oxy-fuel, but also with those shade 5s, you're protecting your vision. While it may not be as bright of a light as it would be with stick welding or MIG welding, you're still looking at a relatively bright light. It's a lot better for your vision of having those shade 5 glasses on while you're cutting or welding. Gloves, as well as long sleeves, covering up. Again, not dealing with as much as you would be stick or MIG, but as far as sparks, save yourself the hassle and the annoyance of the amount of sparks that come off of with cutting and welding. Have yourself the long sleeves. Of course, you're dealing with fire. You're going to be heating up metal to intense amounts of heat. Give yourself some gloves, okay? While you're going to be welding. So welding gloves are a must-have as you are welding with oxy-fuel or cutting with oxy-fuel. But that concludes our discussion regarding oxy-fuel welding and cutting.